Hello, everybody. Welcome to Positive Fandom. And welcome to the Burnettwork. I am your host, Mmmm. And of course, we have with us tonight Julian. Julian, how are you?
I'm doing just great, RM. It's wonderful to be here talking about one of the most wonderful shows we've got lately for all mankind.
Absolutely, Julian. Guys, welcome to the PGS Moving Image Review for All Mankind, Season 4, Episode 7, Crossing the Line. Crossing the Line. Please click the like and subscribe buttons. Also, hello to Tom Jr. Jackson, my moderator, collaborator, and good friend. Tom, thank you so much for everything that you do. And thank you for being here. Guys, thank you for everybody being here. We have Scott Bartholomew here as well. Also, Darth Plato is here tonight. Great to see you guys. And Daniel Berry, sports highlights as well. So good to see you guys here, as well as John Cipolla. Julian, for all mankind. Oh my gosh, episode 7 already. That means that there's, oh no, 3 episodes left. Oh no, it's going by fast. And as predicted, you predicted the strike. We certainly did see some interesting things in this episode, Julian. And certainly we are left with a lot of disgruntled Helios employees who feel that they deserve more. They do deserve better treatment. There is no doubt about it. And seeing their faces, this look of woe on their faces as they find themselves, across the seat in the beginning, from speaking to Danny, speaking to, I guess it's Palmer. I could be wrong about his name, but it just feels like nothing is happening, and it feels like time has passed by, and they seem to, like, Ed is there with them. This very sad group of Helios workers, and Danny is at the table, and I'm thinking to myself, well, what, Danielle can't do anything about this. Like it feels kind of weird that she's even talking to them. She's not a mediator. Does she have any control? Why is she even talking at the table?
That's what's kind of strange. The relationship between what's going on, we don't actually know how the contracts are working between, the Earth government forces that, the groups, the various groups of space programs that are there, and what Helios is doing. We just know that for the most part, Helios was kind of hired as, a lot of the service work on the base, and some of them were also hired as miners and astronauts and stuff. But we don't know why it is that there is why Danielle has this, position as, other than she's the one who's there, kind of representing this other group. It is odd that that's the way that they've set up this opposition between them all, because we don't know exactly how that works. All we know is they had to set up something so that the Helios employees were pissed, and everybody else is kind of like on the other side. You would think that if they're pissed, then Helios would be the ones that they would be talking to. But and in a way they kind of were, because Palmer, as the new XO, is a Helios employee. So he is kind of the chief Helios executive there, now that Ed has gone to the other side and fomented this whole, helped foment this whole thing to try and get some sort of position back that he's angling for. So yeah, we know that he wants to stay on Mars. So maybe he thinks that this is the only way he's going to be able to stay, because he thinks that if he's just sitting there doing nothing, they're going to ship him back, because he's just taking up space and oxygen and food. So, yeah, it is interesting how they showed how downtrodden is. The laundry is all piling up in bins, and it's kind of ridiculous because it's like, come on, can't your astronauts and scientists figured out how to run the laundry machines? And so even the tree out in the central core looks like it's dying because nobody's paying attention to it anymore. So yeah, things are going kind of downhill, and we're at an impasse at the table.
Yeah, it is pretty bleak times. Things are bad, and obviously it is very interesting because Ed focuses a lot on Danielle and focusing a lot of his anger on Danielle, and she's been nothing but kind to him. So she doesn't deserve any of this treatment. And she's kind of, looking at Ed, and Ed, just it's just kind of weird. I almost don't even recognize Ed anymore. I don't know who this person is. What I do know is that he's not a mission commander anymore. He's not any of those things that I used to associate him with. Now he's like one of those people that goes into the crowd and stirs up trouble. That's how I'm viewing him. Even Danielle calls him out. She says, look, before you were saying how unqualified all these workers were, and now you're part for the common man. And she called him out. He's like, don't try and make this about me. And I'm like, no, it's totally about you, Ed. It's totally about you. You've stepped away so far from being somebody who wants to lead people, wants to, command a mission. And now all you care about is being on the negotiating table for, what is essentially a group of people who are trying to form, I guess, a union or whatever it is. It does feel like it's a completely different Ed. Where is the Ed that we know gone? Julian, it hasn't been that long ago that he was flying around and doing missions.
I think I think a lot of this started even before Mars for him. He was kind of feeling down and out even when they went up to that space station early on. I think it was season 2 or 3, and he was injecting his hip with steroids and stuff, and he was already kind of on his way out. Going to Mars, getting onto Helios and going to Mars was the only way he was gonna get himself back into some sort of whoever Ed is. But by that time it was all, yeah, exactly, Scott. He's emotionally damaged goods, and physically too. And he's a bitter old man, pretty much, which is too bad. I mean, he was such an important figure in the space race for the U.S. in the early part of this, and now he's just being a bitter old man. He's just all about himself, and so it's no fun to watch who he has become. That's definitely true.
Yeah, it is sad to see what she's turned into. And certainly I think that at any point, and something that I thought was very ballsy was that let's say for all practical purposes, the managers are like, we're not going to put up with this. And there's a point where Irina is talking to the NASA head, and she's like, we can't have this happen. These guys are engineers, and they are capable of doing everything that these workers can do, which is true. They can. We saw it happen. It didn't turn out the way they wanted it to turn out, which is not a surprise. And we even hear one worker say something like, well, you're not supposed to bypass, you're not supposed to do this. So we actually hear the engineers telling other engineers,
Yeah.
you're not supposed to do that. Don't do that. And I thought to myself, that was very interesting because I wondered, Julian, why was it that those engineers didn't listen to one another? Why didn't they take one another seriously?
Personalities and how the environment that you've been in. It was really kind of cavalier. If you've been in a situation where making do with what you've got has worked for you in the past, then you're going to think that it'll still work. But no, he certainly did not think about that. And of course, were discussing, the fact that they had to get out to the fuel processing plant because they need to make enough fuel so that they can get it up to Ranger and get their ship out there to try and get the asteroid on its way to Earth. And in a daring move, of course, the Helios striking employees took all the environmental suits and put them out in the plane there, and took their tractors and stuff and blocked the exits and stuff like that. So they're like, how are we going to get to the suits? So I guess they've got the only working ones hidden somewhere, that for them to be able to do that. But they managed to find a way by draining the gray water out of a sump pipe that was down in the bowels, and they climbed in and they got over to the fuel plant. And of course, there were parts missing because the striking workers were not silly and just left it there. They took parts, and that regulator did make a difference. And even if they get over there and fix it, I don't know. I don't know how fast they're going to be able to fix it, even if, most of the strikers decided to go over to dev. I don't know how long they're going to be able to get it fixed. How long it's going to take to get it fixed. Will it be in time?
Yeah, and this is a good point because, I don't think anybody was expecting the engineers to fail at getting this processing plant running up. And there's even a point where during the strike where they, the Helios workers realize what's going on, that the engineers are going to actually do their job. And they're like, oh shit, what are we going to do? And one guy's like, I don't know, what are we going to do? One guy says, well, you're a freaking pussy. And the other guy says, oh yeah, well, they're trying to fuck us. And I'm like, yeah, like I wanted to hear the tough talk. I wanted to hear the smack talk. I wanted to hear the locker room talk. But this is getting serious. This completely derail. First of all, I never thought I would ever hear anybody calling somebody else a pussy on For All Mankind, but it was refreshing to just kind of hear this. But also, this is getting very serious because this is their leveraging power. And now all of a sudden they're losing their leveraging power. And it's happened rather quickly because you hear somebody say, oh, they said it was only going to be 2 souls before they were just going to cave in. And, I never thought anybody would necessarily cave in, so to speak. This is going to be a bumpy ride for them, even if they hijack the station, which is what they essentially are trying to do, although they're not necessarily completely disabling it. What they're doing is making it hard for them to refine this fuel that's going to be needed to deter or push the asteroid into a favorable position. So, I think it is really interesting that someone decided to remove a part. But what I have seen in the past, and this is not always the case, Julian, what I've seen in the past is that they'll take the part and they'll hang it up somewhere. And you can see that there are parts that have been removed. And, it's like, that's just a warning. And my real question is, after they found out that people were over in the fuel area, and they didn't know, that was the other thing. They didn't know how these engineers got there. And I'm thinking to myself, they're engineers. These guys could probably do anything. And Danny actually calls them out. She says, you guys are making excuses as to why you can't get there. We're engineers. We can do anything. I don't want to hear that you guys are saying you can't get over there. So we knew they were going to find a way over there. But what I find kind of really disappointing is the fact that I almost felt that the striking Helios workers should have said, we have to warn you that some of the stuff might be disassembled and you need those parts. Julian, it ended up in a disaster. What do you think, Julian? Do you think they should have said, hey, we've got some of the parts and it's disassembled and you guys can never get it running? What do you think? Do you think it would have happened anyway, even if they had said that?
Well, so they took that regulator that they took was crucial for part of the thing, and with it missing, it wasn't going to work, right? And it gave them the telltales, all the red lights, nothing was happening, and they knew that. So I think the technicians who took that knew that they're going to get a big warning. They're not going to be able to work this without this piece. That's what she said. They're not going to get very far without this piece. And the safeties were there to tell them that's not there. You can't do it, right? So the safeties mechanisms worked. And if they had left well enough alone or figured out how to make some sort of a new regulator, they would have been good. But they didn't. You had this, guy who's like, oh, we can fix it, skin of our teeth. We'll figure out how to do this thing. All you have to do is bypass. We'll take this thing here, And it's like, well, it's a regulator. It's a regulator for a purpose, So that was kind of ridiculous for them to think that it was going to, yeah, you maybe bypassed it, but there was a reason the regulator was there. So yeah, it was that was their fault. They didn't. It is kind of dumbfounding that one, guy thinks, oh, the tolerances are enough. We don't need the regulator, and the other guy is going, we need the regulator. So it's like, yeah, they may be engineers, but they're not all engineers for the same things, for the same disciplines, and if they're not actually the technicians, it's like, well, yeah, sure, you can jury rig something, but is it really going to work? And under this situation, it did.
Yeah,
I'm actually surprised that. Yeah, I'm actually surprised that their cost, that the fatalities was lower. I think they only lost one person on that, and they had 3 in critical and 2 others severely injured. But I would have thought that explosion, the way it looked from the exterior shot, I thought that was like, we're venting to space, right? I'm like, how did they survive? I would have thought that they would have all been killed like right away, because you see that kind of smoke and an explosion, you think, oh, they've just vented out into the Martian atmosphere. They shouldn't even be alive. That's incredible, and it's kind of interesting that they sidestepped saying how they managed to survive, since they were all right there in that room.
Yeah, it's questionable. And certainly I myself am wondering how, or, what the story is, or what their protocols are. Maybe they have certain safety protocols that pretty much allowed them to make it through. But I agree with you. I think that it is something to think about when it comes to how they're surviving. And I can't help but wonder, at some point, even though they were given orders to get this thing up and running, they could have said at some point, let's just go ahead and test it and see if all the parts fit and all the gauges are, because it did feel as if they just went ahead and pushed, hard in trying to get this thing operational. And maybe they went in too fast, but I think it is very interesting talking about this. The other thing too that I was going to say is, when these guys decided that they were going to do this strike and everything, and they thought things were going to go their way, it really seemed, I didn't understand in the last episode that they were going to try and force Helios to bring the asteroid to Mars, which was the original plan, I guess, versus bringing it to another location. And I was quite surprised by that, because even I know that that's very unrealistic for them to demand. That would be kind of like saying, we want you to spend another $1 billion so we can do the work. They could have also said, hey, why don't you just bring us to the other place and let us work there? Like, there could have been other things that they were saying that were more realistic then, because there's already a whole bunch of people on the moon. They already have tons of workers there. They got those moon miners, Julian. They got those moon miners, from the reality show Moon Miners on there. So they got a whole crew there already. So now they're like, we don't want that crew to get the work. We should get it. It doesn't really seem to make a lot of sense when you're looking at it from that point of view at this point. especially since these Mars workers are newer workers when compared to the ones on the moon. So I think it is really interesting, that they think that they're going to be able to change, this direction of where things are going, when clearly anybody in the galaxy knows that it makes more sense for it not to go to Mars.
Well,
So,
let's remember the very first plan when they spotted this and started talking about capturing it was to send it to Mars. That was the first plan. They just didn't like the numbers that Helios was saying this is what it's going to cost to do it, because you have to send all these vehicles out to Mars, you have to do all this other stuff to send out to Mars. And also remember that those Helios employees on Mars, that's what they were, a lot of them were hired to do, was go and work on these asteroids that they were going to capture and that were out in the asteroid belt. And we saw that at the beginning of the season, that they were trying to capture it, that asteroid, and bring it to Mars. That was the original plan, that they were going to bring it to Mars and start working on it. And suddenly, after that big, accident where they lose two guys, and everything on the whole, whatever you want to call it, that they used to try and push that thing, it just, that they spent a lot of money on that, and they said, no, we're not going to do that now. And so they're sitting up there having to do work that they weren't hired to do. So they're not making the money that they were supposed to be making. And they have a right to be angry about that. That was the first, the whole plan had been originally with the other asteroids. It's just those other asteroids don't necessarily have the riches that Goldilocks has. So that's why it got changed. But, you bring up a good point, that it's like they argued, let's bring it to Mars, and he's like saying it's not going to happen. And then at the end of the show, he says to Ed, why don't we hijack that asteroid and bring it to Mars? It's like, make up your mind, dude.
well, actually, he doesn't. Does he say he's going to bring the asteroid to Mars?
Well, where else is he going to take it?
I don't know, but does he say? I don't remember him saying he's going to bring it to Mars. I think he said he just wanted to steal it.
That's fair. That's fair. I know he didn't say, he did say he wanted to steal it. I don't remember him saying exactly like, let's bring it to Mars. But his whole thing is, we need to make Mars, we need to make them realize that Mars needs to be a colony. Right? So how's he planning to do that? I don't get it. And where else is he going to take the asteroid? It's not like he has some hidden base somewhere out there that, so that's really weird. What, and I'm like, well, what's he got planned? Okay, well then, so I made the assumption that maybe he actually is going to bring it to Mars, but then if that's the case, why didn't he tell them that to get them all on his side? Instead of, that's what they were demanding. And now he's like, well, we're not going to take it to Earth. Where else are you going to take it?
Yeah, so, it is really interesting, because I think that if there is going to be any kind of movement in the way that Dev is describing, it's going to be a huge manipulation. It's the only way he can do this. He has to lie to all the Helios employees. He has to lie to all the investors, the CEO. He has to lie to Alita. He has to lie to Kelly. Like, everybody who works for him, he has to lie and do this. He's even going to lie to Ed, let's say, hypothetically, in the end of it all. And Scott Bartholomew says, I'm sorry for the scatter comments. I'm drinking whiskey after my AQ2 St. Vista's dance I experienced earlier today. Well, that you enjoy yourself, Scott. We understand. And that's fine. We're just glad you're here, and we're glad everybody who is here as well. I think that Arena, who is here in the picture, along with the other gentleman from NASA, believe that they have things under control. And I think that along with them, Danielle also believes that she has things under control. However, when you finally do see Dev, I don't know if this is the picture of him coming on board, but when you finally see Dev finally make it, I don't have one. Yeah, there it is. When Dev finally lands on Mars, Julian, it's pretty clear that he's up to no good. Like, from the second his smug smile, he's smug, and there's no reason for him to be that way, knowing the tension level. Danielle says, I've got to know what's going on, what you plan on doing with all these people who are all upset. I need to know what's going on. And his reaction is like, well, thanks so much for chatting with me, Danielle. You can show your way out. It's disturbing. It's disturbing. I mean, I think that Dev has plans that are just so out of the box, so like out there, that none of us can really understand what he's going for. And I kind of like thought to myself, gee, how do you steal an asteroid? Well, how would a person do it? Like, what are the things? Dev looks like he's just playing the game when he arrives on Mars, but he's doing something that might be considered very unethical, Julian. And we've seen that he doesn't necessarily care about ethics from the previous season, with the things he's done. Are people going to lose their lives because of Dev's ambition in this
Oh,
season?
most definitely. He is the ends justify the means, and he really doesn't care too much about other people as long as he gets what he wants. Nothing has changed in him.
I think it's become even more of an obsession for him. I don't even recognize him. Like, he and Ed are both on these very strange pathways where I'm not going to say I don't recognize Dev, because I do recognize that he does stuff like this. It's just that when you combine Dev and Ed together as a unit, they've had friction before. I anticipate they're going to have friction again. But Dev is scaring me. I am scared of him. And, I'm just terrified of him. And he's very resolved. Look at him. He's happy. He's fine with everything. And I think when he gets to Mars and he lands, and Danielle greets Kelly and Kelly's son, it's the first time, I guess, that Ed ever meets his grandson. And boy, Julian, it is one of the coldest receptions. It's terrible. Julian, is Ed ever going to be able to talk to his grandson and have a relationship?
Yeah, I it's it seems to me that they had been communicating, via screen and stuff like that for, earlier on. I mean, he's what, 7 years old? So it doesn't seem like they would be strangers. I'm not exactly sure why he's so upset with his grandpa. He wanted to see him, but I think he's more upset that he wouldn't come back to Earth instead of him having to come out there. He's kind of like not liking that, even though, as we find out, medically, it's a lot easier for his body to work out in space with the reduced gravity and things like that. So that's kind of interesting, making him kind of the first, stellar, citizen in a way. And what really gets me, though, they make a point of showing that Ed is about himself. He's not, he's not paying attention to the fact that, his grandson doesn't want Parmesan cheese on his spaghetti. And, it's like, wow. It's like, figure it out, dude. It's not all about you, but that he's just run on autopilot, it seems. doing stuff the way Ed always does stuff.
Yeah, and it's Scott says that Ed is socially and emotionally retarded since being in space for years, and before this is over, Ed will impart some lifelong attributes not good to his grandson. That's scaring me even more, Scott. The notion of Ed having any influence over his grandson, that really scares me a little bit there. I'm sorry for the panning. Oops. Okay. Um, and I think it's really interesting too, Julian, that there is that disconnect. And so, Kelly is there. She's, kind of being cool about it and fine with it, but it does have an effect over children. And, everybody's talking about how there are some people who want to stay on the planet. Ed obviously wants to stay there. Dev, I guess, wants to stay there. Maybe the grandson will stay there because it's healthier for him. Maybe Kelly will stay there too. I mean, there's nothing really holding her back on Earth at this point. It's something to think about going forward. But one thing I really am curious about is this lady here, Alita, who unfortunately finds herself on the hot seat again, Julian. I mean, she can't seem to escape controversy. You know, um, she goes on this unfortunate interview where the interviewer is asking her questions that are making her feel so uncomfortable. And it's making me feel uncomfortable. Gee, Julian, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want to have to answer questions about Margot. She's persona non grata. You've got one of the Supreme Court justices, or maybe even a Secretary of State, calling Margot Madison the biggest traitor to the United States of a generation. And now you got a reporter pressing Alita, asking her questions about, her defecting to Russia and all sorts of stuff. Oh my gosh. What I want to know is, since we know Margot's coming to the US, are we going to see Margot and Alita get into a cat fight like the women in Dynasty? Like, are we going to see something like that? What is going to happen when they finally are face to face again? Because Alita is not the same person we saw when she first saw Margot in Russia, a few months ago, or it's not the same. What do you think?
Um, yeah, I understand her feelings, but the way the show kind of, the way it sets its course is, I think they're gonna they're gonna end up working together again because for whatever the issue that's gonna come up, they're gonna have to work together, and it's gonna be grudgingly, I'm sure. Um, I have a sneaking suspicion that Margot is going to be targeted by some sort of assassin.
Oh my god, that's scaring me to death.
Yeah,
Oh my gosh, that's so scary. You think
that's.
she's gonna be hit? You think someone's gonna take a hit on Margot?
I think they're going to try.
That will break me. I don't Oh my gosh, that's so scary. You think she's in mortal danger?
Yes, I do. It's like we've got a political. It's been alluding to a political party that is not happy with where the executive is currently going, and
As our Plato says, I want hair, I want fingernails. Me too.
yeah,
I want to
yeah,
see the cat fight happen. My engine.
yeah,
You gave them my engine. I had to. It was the right thing to do. I just want to hear it all. I
yeah,
want to see pearls flying. I want to see it all. But you think it's going to be more like,
yeah.
she's going to get, that's awful. Assassination.
That news channel that suckered her into that interview, that was showing us that, and the comments that we are hearing about how a lot of people are feeling about her, tells me that there is a group out there that, there are people out there that are, and we know this from today in the real world, that there are people out there that are willing to do some of these things based on how, when they hear these news groups and the politicians talking about their, opponents. They shouldn't even be opponents. In real world time, we've had stations that for decades have been spewing hatred about people on the opposite political spectrum and classifying them as enemies and traitors to the country. And these are their fellow citizens of the same country. And it bothers me, and it wouldn't surprise me if in the show there is a group that would be willing to do that for whatever opposing political party is, sitting in the wings. So I'm not saying that it would be successful. I'm just saying I wouldn't be surprised if there is a shot taken at her of some sort. The way the stories kind of go, I wouldn't be surprised if maybe Alita ends up getting in the crossfire. That would be tragic.
Oh my god! Oh my god, Julian! Oh my god!
These are things we can think of that are possibilities. Now, it doesn't mean that it's going to happen, and if it doesn't, then we're like, okay, good.
That would kill
Yeah,
me because Alita's like one of the greatest minds of the day, and the idea that Margot would be somehow either, I guess, indirectly the reason why Alita would be killed, it absolutely breaks my heart. Like that really is just, oh my gosh. I just think it would be awful. Um, but I understand what you're saying, and boy, that would just really break me. I think, yeah, that would break me. I hope that does not happen, but I can see what both you and Scott are saying about how that could happen. Essentially, what Margot is doing is putting everyone in danger. And, I don't think the only reason why she doesn't want to go to the United States is because she's trying to avoid embarrassment. Maybe you're right, Julian. Maybe she's trying because she feels there might have been threats made against her. There probably has been threats against her. Darth Plato says Margot doesn't strike me as a traitor on the level of Rosenberg's or John Walker. But these things
certainly.
can be, look at what you said, Julian. The woman who is interviewing Alita is implying a lot of things. And Alita's reaction, Alita didn't defend Margot. Not that she was in a position to, but she didn't defend Margot. She avoided the question, right, Julian?
Oh yeah, she even avoided it all. She stormed off because she got they blindsided her. It was and she was not ready for that. She if she'd been ready for it, she might have been able to say, "Look, I'm not here to talk about what she did," and either get it back on track or have them terminate the interview because you decide I am not going to play your game, right? But she should have known. She should have done her research and known what kind of angle those that reporter was that interviewer was going to take on her, given the channel, the station, whatever the network that she was going to. They have struck me as the hard right type of news mongering, that eagle whatever. They've always been kind of anti-government in their stuff.
Yeah, and that is something to think about. Darth Plato says that an asteroid will hit Earth, kind of like
I
in The
like it.
Expanse, right?
I like it.
um, yeah, that would be something. And all of a sudden, it's just the Martian colonies. That would be something that is really interesting. And thank you, Darth Plato, as well. I think Alita is in a position that she doesn't want to be in. She doesn't want Margot to have immunity, and I get that as well. Um, And I'm panning down to something. Yeah, I think that was everything on this one. But I think what is also kind of interesting about how Alita was so adamant on Margot not having immunity. She went to speak to the NASA director. She walks into the man's office. And when she walks into the office, she tells him, "Look, I've got to tell you, you cannot have her come here." Does she have any real pull with that man? Or is she just kind of, playing the game, going through the motions, maybe even trying to remove herself from any attachments to Margot, any perceived attachments to Margot as well?
She's a Helios employee. She doesn't work for NASA, so no, she doesn't really have any pull other than the fact that she came up with some of the equations and the math that they're going to need to use to get their plan to work. So she is kind of essential in that, but so is Margot. And yeah, I think you're right. I don't think she wants to have that association, that guilt by association that she's feeling kind of stained by, and she's feeling very betrayed by Margot. As much as she's happy that she's alive, she's also angry that, it's like, you did what I was afraid I thought you had done. You gave them those plans, and you compromised our chance to get ahead of the Russians in space. That, and while she may not have given them weapons, giving them the leverage to be able to stay at parity with the US didn't do them any favors, because they were already kind of on the high end because they were the first ones on the moon. So it's not, it's like that's a hit. She doesn't matter if it was like weapons. It wasn't weapons, but it was something equally as bad socially and politically. So, yeah, she's got a right to be angry at Margot, and but she doesn't want Margot to show up. Well, Margot didn't want to go out either. She's like, you can't send me. That's not right. I can't go. And probably kind of for the same reason. She knows how indelicate situation's going to be with her there. So she has, the a reason, good reasons to be uncomfortable with going to the U.S.
Yeah, and part of these reasons too are because she was told she wouldn't have to go back, as Scott mentions, and also Jermaine. Hi, Jermaine. Also mentions the same thing. She was told that she would, I guess not ever have to go there, and it is awkward to have to go and speak to the same people you used to work for under this particular circumstance. We know that the comments she made about her defecting it was a lie. So she had to make this speech that was completely false. So we know she's already been lying. In fact, I'm sure that everybody who heard that knew that Margot was lying and it was a prepared speech. I think that's when Alita, was kind of like, I can't support her. So
No, she was already done before that. I don't think the speech had anything to do with it. She was willing to work with her, but remember, she talks to her husband. She says the more, she's like, I thought, I was happy that she was alive, but the more I thought about it as I was there, the angrier I got, and the more betrayed I felt. She was feeling that even as they were working together. And she was doing it begrudgingly because they were trying to work the problem. And she's probably the only other person that probably could have worked with her to figure out what they need to do. But other than that, she doesn't want to have anything to do with her because of that betrayal.
yeah, and it's something to think about. Certainly I'm wondering going forward, she's already there. She's in the US right now, and she had to go into the Molly Cobb building. It's a hell of a coincidence, although it was not her fault, that she left the day of the unfortunate attack on the building. But for her to return also after that incident, it is uncomfortable knowing that so many of her colleagues were hurt, and she managed to escape that fate of being in the building when the attack took place. And Alita also kind of, mentions that to her. Jermaine talks about the PTSD and quitting NASA because she died. Yeah, that's also a good point, Jermaine. Something to think about when she talks. And as I told you, you guys already know I want to see the cat fight. I would much rather a cat fight, just in the spirit of things. Um, when she starts talking about how she solves the problem, maybe she'll answer a question, and it's something that she has to say because they've given her the answers already, and Alita will be like, "That's not true. You didn't do that." And and then it kind of turn into this kind of cat fight thing. But I know we're not going to get a cat fight. But um, I still think it would be very funny to see that. And I also want to mention, and we did kind of briefly talk about it, was the way that yes, Breeze, the way that Dev presents this offer to his employees. And we did briefly mention it, but he pretty much offers them what's essentially $1 million. It's nothing to him. He's a billionaire. It doesn't matter to him what happens in regards to this. It's not his own money. He's offering them shares that are worth like maybe $1 million or whatever it is. And he knows he can bring everybody over to his side, hence the crossing the line. They're crossing the picket line. And certainly it was very interesting to see the way he negotiated. He just threw money at them. That's, I guess, what they pretty much wanted. And you're right, Scott. It does have to do with the Alfred P. Murray building in Oklahoma City, which was the building that had the bombing in 2000, and I think it was 2000 and 2000, maybe it was 2000, the year 2000, around there, that the bombing took place. So that was a real life event that happened there. But in regards to Dev and this offer that he makes his employees, which there's it's such a disadvantage in this station on Happy Valley, and pretty much it seems like none of them except for the one woman knows the contract. Ed knows the contract. He's offered them verbally a new contract. You were saying, Julian, you don't even believe that the offer of amnesty, or people not being punished, would be honored. What do you think Dev is not going to honor? Do you think he's going to renege on the whole thing? What do you think?
Well, no, it's just I don't think he has stated that they've offered, not to, that there would be amnesty, but how do we know that it's not true? We haven't heard this confirmed from any of the government groups, from the US or the Soviets. We haven't heard this confirmed. So, I mean, again, how do we know this is true? For all we know, as soon as they finish the job or whatever, they're, apprehended and arrested and, confined. The other thing that's on my mind, kind of thinking about this, is we know that there are assets by both, most likely, the KGB and the CIA that are working up there. Who knows? That makes me wonder about our Russian friend now, as he was being so careful not to, become too high profile. Maybe part of that is because he's actually KGB.
And we did hear, excuse me, discussion about there being, these undercover operatives there, and certainly people who have former military experience. Of course, there are former military or current military enlisted people who they're on Mars, and they do kind of, come down a little heavy fisted on everybody. But it is very interesting to see how a lot of this kind of plays out. And thank you, Scott Bartholomew, who says it was in 1995 was the bombing. Thank you, Scott, for refreshing my memory. Yeah, this amnesty comment was a stretch. He says that their shares could be worth up to $1 million. And both of you guys are like, Dev of Mars, King of Mars. Um, you know, is he going to start one of those cults on Mars, Julian? Is
Oh,
he
look at
going to
him! Look at him there! Look at that picture. He's he's the poster boy for a cult.
It's creepy. There's
Cult
this
of Dev.
creepiness to him, and like it's such a contrast to Danielle, who is so professional, who has so things in order. I want Danielle to get the hell out of Happy Valley and come back to Earth, because all sorts of craziness is happening on Happy Valley. I think she needs to get out of there before the end of the season. I don't want Danielle to be up there. If there has to be a sole survivor, let it be Danielle. And if everybody else wants to stay on Mars and join the cult, that's their business. But it's almost feels like they're signing their lives away. Are they signing their lives away by joining in and agreeing to these new terms that Dev has put out for them?
Uh, I don't think about. I wouldn't put it in those terms. Not signing their lives away, but they're certainly, if at worst they're putting themselves back in the same situation they were, with just a little bit more cash in the pocket, perhaps. But I think they still have to worry about what could happen and repercussions because of their actions. I kind of can foresee that what might, as Dev and Ed ramp their plan to do whatever it is that they're going to do, stealing the asteroid, that as they do that, it's possible that both the U.S. and the Soviets decide to, activate their agents in order to try and stop it, and that's what could precipitate whatever next major disaster could potentially befall them. Kind of like what almost happened on the moon. When forces collided there. So that will be kind of interesting to see if that's how that develops.
Yeah, and
I
of
mean,
course,
mentioning that they have. I was just going to say, mentioning that they have those assets in place is kind of like Chekhov's gun. You don't show it unless you plan to use it, and so bringing it
well,
up kind of
this
implies that they're going to use them.
This is very interesting. Scott says indentured servitude for loads of money that you have nowhere or no time to spend. That is very interesting. Maybe he just needs warm bodies on the planet to make an argument for colonization. And yeah, I wasn't going to mention any specific ones. Maybe that is a bit of a far-fetched comment, but when I say this group, that he needs bodies in order to create a colony, and why not commandeer these guys? They're not doing anything too significant, right, Julian? They're not doing the jobs they thought they were going to be doing, and you can get anybody up there to do the jobs they're doing, but he needs people to stay there. He might sweeten the deal and say, if you guys stay there, I'll throw in another 100,000.
Well,
It could.
maybe they can't necessarily get all of that money, but for most of them, they have families back home. That's where that money's going. It's going into bank accounts so that their families can access it. They can access it too, but yeah, sure, they don't have a lot of amenities that they can get other than through the black market, but that money is going into accounts so that their families back home can live. So I don't see it as exactly an indentured servitude, but certainly they're kind of trapped there at this moment in time. As far as cult, Darth Plato, I'd like to mention that when we first meet Dev, the way he works with Helios, with that first core group of Helios employees, that is kind of the way that they looked at him and kind of were in lockstep with whatever he wanted. That was the very beginnings of core of some sort of a cult type of thing. They really were, following him very uncomfortably, it seemed to me. So maybe, certainly he's not Applewhite or Koresh, but Scott.
Thanks for sharing that, Scott, who says he spent 13 years of indentured servitude serving aboard submarines in the Navy. Good for you, Scott, for letting
Thank
us
you
know.
for
I
your
know
service.
absolutely, and I know a submariner who is serving now, and he's out there. Maybe, I doubt that he's watching this, but he is definitely on our minds. Thank you for your service, Scott. I what I want to know, and I would like everybody in the chat to go ahead and tell me this as well, and you, Julian, as well, of course. They're going to steal an asteroid. I want to know how you would do it. And I also want to know if you're going to go so high as to steal an asteroid, certainly you could bring that man's wife on board. How would you do both of them? How would you do both? And will tell me, guys, in the chat, how would you steal an asteroid? You got to get that man's wife on there, because if you're going to tell me you can steal an asteroid, you can certainly bring her on to Mars. So I want to know how you would do both. Hell, how would you take over Helios? Let's just hear it, because I've got to get some opinions on what you guys would think. Julian, how would you steal an asteroid?
Well, I assume that they're going to use the same methods that they were going to use to push it to Earth, or pull it to Earth, or whatever it was that they're planning to do. But maybe they're just going to change the angle of where it's heading somehow. Maybe they're going to hack into the thruster profiles or something like that, and make it go off course.
Well, Darth Plato says stealing the asteroid would be easier than getting the wife out of North Korea, honestly. Good for you, Darth Plato. It's a good point. I think to be honest with you, I think what I really like about this show is that um is that we're seeing people contemplate what many of us would consider the impossible. And time again, the show doesn't seem to surprise me by what they're able to accomplish. And we did see a situation in this episode where people were doubting that they could get to that fuel area. And Daniel's like, no, we can do it. Like, there's nothing we can't do. I think a continued theme of the show is that there is nothing that they can't do if you can work the problem. I would want to get Margot and Alita together and figure out how to steal that asteroid and get the Korean wife onto Happy Valley. I think those two ladies could find an answer, as I mentioned before. Yes, North Korea. Yes, thank you, Darth Plato. Good for them. Good for North Korea for getting the asteroid. They'll hide it somewhere in the solar system. We can't find where it is. Let them enjoy that prosperity. Scott says they will use a Tesla howitzer to alter the asteroid trajectory. Okay, just kidding. Haha. No, you don't. We maybe. I mean, why not? Let's go ahead and think about that. That's not a bad idea. In fact, I think that the ship that Dev has flown on to get to Mars is heading for that asteroid right now somehow. I don't know what the story is or how it's going to work, but it's heading back in that direction, isn't it? Who knows? Maybe it's hiding around the other side of the planet. Dev has to have some kind of trump card that he will be. Yes, crash the Nauvoo. Yes, of course, he's talking about the Expanse. Um, uh, and Ed will have to fly again to help steal it. Very good, Jermaine. I think I agree on that one. But we all know that Ed has a shaky hand. Julian, what do you think? Will Ed have to take control of the ship, but then end up crashing it into the asteroid?
Sure, that's a possibility. That hand's going to get him in trouble.
Yeah, that is quite a comment. Yeah, Darth Plato says, I wonder if he knows about the shaky hands. Yeah, that's a good question. I wonder as well, Darth Plato. Ed, yeah, he might appear to be fully. I think that Danielle would have reported it. I think Danielle would have reported it at this point. She can't just take him off duty, right?
Well, no, I don't. I think when she removed him, I think she said that she wouldn't mention about the hand that she would, say something else. I think she
Oh, she
kind of
said that?
covered for him.
Oh,
I
I didn't
I think
know.
I can't remember, but I thought that she kind of covered because that's what she's always been doing is covering for these guys.
She has
You
been
know,
covering him, and I think it's time for her to call in some favors. That's just me. I think Danielle should play her cards and be like, "You know what, Ed? I know something that Dev doesn't know, and it's payback time," which would be great. But that's not Danielle. That's more, kind of dynasty style comeback. But Jermaine says, "Good point, RM. Dev he prepared for this. Yeah, he's totally prepared for this. He has something somewhere, and it's a done deal, and everybody looks all, oh, I wonder how we're going to do it. Dev has already have figured out. He is also a brilliant engineer. Scott says it would be like the movie Armageddon. I don't want to close my eyes. I don't want to fall asleep because I miss you, babe. And I don't want to miss a thing. Right? That's no Liv Tyler, and no Eric.
no, no, but
Oh,
we don't know what's happened with those robot dog things now.
oh yeah, I forgot about the robot dogs. Those creepy robot dogs that can do so much. That
He's
is
going to
very
use them maybe to take over the base, maybe to take over mission control there on Mars, or somehow I don't know, or they're on board that the ship that's returning. They're kind of fast and loose with is this ship that brought them out just going back and forth? It's like, what's it taking back,
something to
right?
think about. Remember how Miles was Milosh was had certain payloads, and he would say, I have some stuff that has to go back, and don't say anything, mum's the word. I need to bring back 20 tons of rocks and all sorts of stuff. There's smuggling going on that ship, and I have a feeling that Dev knows all about every single detail. He has somebody in there too that's telling him all the good stuff. Darth Plato, you read my mind. Dynasty reboot on Mars. Exactly. I'm so there, Darth Plato. But it is something to think about. And yeah, this is interesting. Would she want to know about Danny? Would Kelly be interested to find out what happened to Danny? Does she not know? Hmm.
I I I think they all know he's dead.
Yes.
I think they all know he's dead. So no, I don't think that she has to know that he went out and killed himself.
Yeah. Well, Julian, this episode, I found it a little more frustrating than the other ones only because of this strike negotiation thing, and I wasn't fond of it. And I think, honestly, I think Dev got on board knowing that it was going to be resolved after he made his offer that they couldn't refuse. Um, yes, and Scott says, seriously, I hope the show lasts for a while and every thread is resolved. Me too, Scott. I have to say that the one thread that I wanted to be solved was solved this season. And of course, poor Danny Stevens, who we lost. He was the person that I wanted to know. And I found out what happened to him. So unfortunately, we know that, as you already mentioned, Julian, he unfortunately took his own life. But um, I don't know. We know there's going to be these next 3 episodes are going to be insane. You predicted that someone's going to do an attempt on Margot's life, and that's scaring me. And it might not even be Margot who unfortunately pays the price for this. It's really scaring me. Oh my goodness. And someone along with you, Julian, I think said that Ed would be the person who takes the wheel and unfortunately has a problem. My internet acting funny, yes. Um, would have a problem going forward. So, you are a fantastic
You're breaking
idea.
up. You're breaking up. You're
Yeah,
breaking up.
I know. I'm sorry, guys. I'm so sorry. I know. I'm coming. I'm here. It's just sometimes it does that. So I apologize. But um Jermaine, he's been
Ah, we're happy to have you with us, Jermaine. All caught up and such. Uh-oh. RM! Come back to us, RM! Come back to us!
Coming back. I'm coming back. But Jermaine, thank you so much for being here tonight.
Lost in space and time. Well, she's frozen. Can't
I'm
she let it
assuming
go?
can. Yes, they have me. Julian, where can people find you?
They can find me right here on Positive Fandom and the Burnettwork, and they can find me on Facebook and Instagram. That's where I'll be. Just
Guys, you
look
can
up my
also
name.
find me here exactly on Positive Fandom and on the Burnettwork. I want to thank everybody who was here tonight for contributing to the show and giving us different ideas about how you think this is going to end. I've been enjoying doing this so much, guys. Join this week at 10 o'clock, episode 8 for season 4 of For All Mankind. We're continuing until the very end, guys, of season 4, which has been phenomenal. Thank you, Tom Jr. Jackson, my moderator, collaborator, friend, for everything. Gonna wrap the show up now before like it kicks me out of the stream completely. And thank you everybody there. Yes, I am lost in space. I couldn't have said it any better, Jermaine. And I am frozen. But I'm gonna let it go. And guys, remember, no matter where you are in the galaxy, always remember to please be kind. Take care, everybody.
Cheers, everyone.